4:29. We're 30 seconds away from the news. On the other side, lots to debate. Is it time for fast food restaurants to redesign their lids after a young child was burned by scalding hot tea? We'll debate that with a personal injury lawyer next. 4:40, welcome back to the show. We all know the feeling of what it's like to get a scalding hot coffee or a boiling hot tea, and then the lid isn't quite on, and the entirety of the beverage topples onto your lap. Once, Danny, this happened to me when I was back in Oakville, and we'd gone past a fast food joint, and I got my typical bagel with cream cheese back in the day, and I had my hot chocolate and my coffee, whatever it was. It might have been a coffee, it might have been a hot chocolate. Yeah. I was a teenager at the time. And whatever happened, it was mainly my fault. The lid wasn't quite on, and all of it went into my lap. And I was in the passenger seat. And I think it was my sister at the time that was driving. And I screamed at her, pull over, because it was all soaked into my jeans. And I was sitting there, and I was sitting in these scalding hot jeans. And I ripped my pants off at the side of the road. Yeah. It's okay to laugh. I was fine. I didn't end up with any serious burns.
Okay, that's good.
But I whipped the pants off because I didn't want to sit in the heat. And that was the right thing to do. And I ended up okay. But we've all been there. And if you don't have a cold towel or cold water or ice or something to alleviate that pain, and if it's all over you, it can be quite serious.
Oh, yeah. I remember younger, my mom, we were in a drive-thru. Again, not naming the place, and the lid popped off. This was not at my mom's fault, and it scalded her stomach and her lap. She had second and third degree burns from hot tea. And anyway, she ended up winning a lawsuit, which included the place having to lower the temperature of the tea, but it's still pretty hot.
Here's a story from another part of Ontario down in Cobourg, where an Ontario family is saying that our country needs national regulations around temperatures for hot beverages. This after their young child offered to go and walk with the mother from a table to go and get the order, and the young child ended up suffering burns from a spilled tea. It happened at a fast food joint. The mother recounts the story like this. She says she was walking to her table earlier this month with an unopened cup of tea when suddenly the lid comes off, the tray falls, and it goes onto her 5-year-old daughter, scalding her. The pictures are really upsetting. Her daughter suffered second-degree burns. She claims she had to take her daughter to the hospital, that the paramedics came, that they went down to the hospital for sick children, where she spent 3 days there, and that she had to go back apparently every single week for new dressings because of her injuries. First and second-degree burns, they say, that covered 12% of her daughter's body. Now, she said the incident was not only traumatizing for her daughter, but they're arguing that it never should have happened, that it was a lack of care from the people working at the restaurant. And not only that, but they feel like there should be national standards, that the temperature of hot drinks needs to be regulated. Joining us right now, Brenda Hollingsworth is standing by. She's a personal injury lawyer at Auger Hollingsworth. They are accident and injury lawyers located here in the capital. Hi, Brenda.
Hi there.
How often does a lawsuit like this or a story like this come across your desk?
Often enough. Like every couple of months, we'll have somebody who has been burned, usually by coffee or tea. Sometimes we'll have burns from like facial spas where something goes wrong with the steam. But it's really quite devastating when it happens.
Especially if it happens to an infant or a child.
Oh, yeah. Terrible.
The family says they're considering launching a petition demanding national action, and they said they haven't ruled out taking legal action. So let's start there. In the case where you're scalded by a hot beverage, it's a coffee, it's a tea, what are the chances that you can actually hold the coffee joint liable?
Fair question. It's not automatic. One thing with the severity of the burns and the amount of medical attention that this child has received, it is likely that a doctor would be able to predict what temperature the beverage was when it poured on her. And that might be something that could give rise. We heard your colleague talk about the case that her mother had, and there have been successful cases. We know that tea and coffee are typically brewed around 200 degrees Fahrenheit, but the enjoyable, safe temperature to drink them is between 130 and 160 degrees. But scalding happens at 125 degrees. So there is a problem in the sense that the temperature we like to drink coffee and tea is hotter than the scalding temperature. So there's always going to be a risk. That's not something that can be eliminated. So what you look at is, what did this establishment do to do their best to eliminate the risk? Are they closer to 30? Are they closer to 200 degrees Fahrenheit? Do they have appropriately fitted lids? We know that there are some establishments that serve coffee and tea that have little stickers that go over the opening to make sure that none pours out that way. So all of those things, is the staff trained to warn the person when they hand over the hot beverage? So those are all individual things that a personal injury lawyer would look at.
Right. And according to the statement from the family, they're claiming that not only was it the accident itself, but they were claiming that after it happened that nobody was there, nobody provided first aid, nobody came up to offer help, and there was actually another customer that left to try and go get them cold water. So there's the aftermath. But when it comes back to the fault of the accident itself, how do you determine whether it's the person, the employee who was pouring the coffee or tea, and it's their fault because they didn't really seal the lid on there properly, they didn't pop it on so that it clicked, versus, let's say, the mother in this case, who was carrying the tray with the hot tea?
Yeah, so in terms of the mother, the establishment is set up so that people carry their food to their table on a tray, and these are not professional servers. So, you can't be certain that a customer is going to make it to the table safely. So really it's incumbent on the store to make sure they haven't overloaded the tray, maybe to help if, somebody's dealing with a child and a tray and hot drinks, maybe to provide help. But really, the question of whether or not the lid was fastened, it's going to really come down to, did anybody see? Because of course the employee does this 100 times a day and will say, I always click it down. I don't remember this situation, but I always click it down. And maybe you look at the design of the lid, right? Not all lids are created equal, and as different lids are developed to be biodegradable, there can be safety issues there that maybe the new design is not appropriate. So we would definitely look at a sample cup and lid to make sure there isn't a design flaw. Like, it shouldn't be hard for the counter staff to put the lid on.
Mm-hmm. Back to the other part, the national petition, where the parents are saying that they believe our country needs greater control over this, that we need better regulations on the temperature of the tea. Do we need to change the standard in fast food restaurants and elsewhere in Canada? What do you think?
Well, I think there are standards. I think there are different restaurant organizations have standards. I think it's probably provincial jurisdiction, not to be pedantic, but I think, really there are standards. The problem, I think, is that, it is very unlikely that the standard is going to be for drinks to be served at a temperature lower than what would scald a child. Nobody's going to be asked to serve tea colder than 100.
Right. That's iced tea at that point. Sort of defeats the purpose.
Or worse, tepid tea, right?
Yeah.
So nobody wants that. And so, the question comes down to, is the tea unreasonably dangerous? And I think it comes down not to the temperature of the tea ultimately. I think there needs to be standards. So, a 200 degree tea is going to scald everybody and their mouths and all of that. But once you're between that zone of 130 and 160, really the safety has to come down to the cup. It really has to come down to, is that lid safe? When you're serving people food on trays, Is that, are you training them to balance the tray, not to overload the tray, to offer to bring the hot drink if the tray is overloaded and there are children? There are solutions that don't involve lowering the temperature below what's drinkable. And as I say, at 125 degrees to scald a child, that's below sort of drinkable tea temperature. So that I don't think that's going to be the solution. I sure understand why that mom wants it.
Great to hear from you today. Thanks so much for phoning in, Brenda.
Yeah, my pleasure.
That's Brenda Hollingsworth. She's a personal injury lawyer at Auger Hollingsworth. They're an accident and injury lawyer firm located here in the capital.